On a storm-lashed night, as rain hammered the gates of a wealthy community, a little barefoot girl stood shivering in the cold, waiting for someone who believed she had died 7 years ago. When the lonely man stepped toward her, she lifted her face through the downpour and whispered,
"Do you remember me?"
He froze, and what she said next would haunt him for the rest of his life. Before we continue, where are you watching from? It's a beautiful reminder that hope connects us all, no matter the miles. We're so glad you're here. Enjoy today's story. The storm didn't announce itself politely. It came down hard and sideways, pounding the stone driveways and glass facades of Harbor Glen, as if trying to breach a world that had spent millions to keep chaos out. Wind pushed rain into sharp needles that rattled against wrought iron gates and whispered through manicured hedges bent low in submission. It was the kind of night that made even the most confident neighborhoods feel exposed. Miles Harrington's black sedan rolled through the private entrance just after 9. The headlights cut a narrow tunnel through the downpour, illuminating slick pavement and the silent outlines of houses that looked more like fortresses than homes. At 42, Miles had learned how to move through life, sealed off. By schedules, security, and distance, his days were filled with meetings and numbers. His nights ended like this, alone in the back seat, coat still buttoned, phone dark in his hand. Silence had become routine. The radio crackled from the front. "Sir," the security guard said, hesitant, there's a little girl at the gate. Says she's waiting for you." Miles frowned, glancing up. "Waiting for me?" "Yes, sir. She won't leave. She keeps asking if you're home." For a moment, Miles assumed it was a mistake. Someone else's child, maybe a prank gone too far in bad weather. Harbor Glen didn't get children wandering alone at night. It didn't get surprises. He exhaled, already reaching for his phone. "Call it in. Let child services handle it." The car slowed anyway. As the headlights swung toward the main gate, something small moved in the beam of light. The guard fell silent. Miles leaned forward. There, clinging to the iron bars as rain soaked her straight through, stood a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7. Her blonde hair was plastered to her cheeks and forehead, tangled and darkened by water. A thin white dress hung off her narrow shoulders, old enough to be translucent in places, clinging to her legs as puddles swallowed her bare feet. She looked impossibly small against the gate like a scrap of paper caught in a storm. Miles's hand froze on the door handle. The guard spoke again, quieter now. "She says she knows you, sir." Miles stepped out under the umbrella, the rain instantly soaking the cuffs of his tailored coat. The cold hit him hard, but he barely noticed. He walked toward the gate, each step measured, unsure why his chest felt tight. Up close, the girl lifted her head. Her eyes, clear, pale, blue, locked onto his face with an intensity that didn't belong to a child standing alone in the rain. They weren't wide with panic. They were searching, waiting. Her lips trembled, teeth chattering as water ran down her chin. Then she spoke, her voice small but steady enough to cut through the storm.
"Do you remember me?"
The world tilted. For a fraction of a second, the sound of rain dropped away, replaced by another corridor, another cold, fluorescent lights, the smell of antiseptic, a doctor's voice, careful and practiced, saying words that shattered something permanent inside him. He remembered standing there 7 years ago, numb, while they told him Savannah was gone, that the baby hadn't made it. He remembered sitting in a chair he didn't recognize, hands shaking as papers were slid in front of him. Leonard Greer's calm voice beside him. "I'll handle everything, Miles. You don't need to look at this right now. Miles swallowed hard, forcing himself back into the present. The girl was still there, still looking at him, waiting for an answer. "That's not possible," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. His voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "You must be mistaken." Behind him, the guard shifted uneasily. "Sir, we really should call this in. It's not safe for her to be out here. Child services, the police." The girl flinched at the word police. Her fingers tightened around the cold iron bars, knuckles whitening. Her gaze flicked past Miles toward the road, not with hope of being taken somewhere warm, but with fear, as if whatever waited beyond the gate was worse than the storm.
Please.
She said, the word barely audible.
I won't stay long. I just needed to ask.
Miles looked at her properly then, the curve of her cheek, the slight tilt of her mouth when she frowned. Something deep and uninvited stirred in his chest. He had seen that face before, not exactly, but close enough to hurt. In photos, in memory. The guard cleared his throat. "Sir?" Miles didn't answer right away. Protocol told him to step back, to let the system take over, to stay in the world he understood. But something about the girl's question, so simple, so devastating, refused to let him turn away. He raised a hand slightly. "Open the gate," he said. "Sir?" "Open it," Miles repeated, his voice low but firm. "Let her in." The iron gate creaked as it began to swing inward. The sound was slow, deliberate, like a door being opened somewhere it had been shut for years. The girl hesitated, glancing up at Miles as if making sure she had heard correctly. Then she stepped forward, crossing the threshold into the dry light of Harbor Glen. Rain continued to fall behind her, but for a moment she was sheltered. Miles closed the umbrella and looked down at her. Water dripped from his coat onto the stone, but he didn't move away. Up close, he could see her shivering, not just from cold, but from something deeper. Fear, hope, both tangled together. Behind them, the storm raged on, impatient and loud, but inside the gate, time seemed to pause, suspended around a single, impossible question. "Do you remember me?" Miles didn't answer her yet. He couldn't. But as he stood there, looking at the child who should not exist, one thing was suddenly clear in a way it hadn't been in years. Whatever truth waited behind that question, walking away from it would haunt him for the rest of his life. What would you do if a child appeared in front of your life like a missing page, asking if you still remembered her? And somewhere between the rain and the silence, the carefully sealed world he had built began, quietly, to crack. Warmth rushed out to meet them the moment the front doors closed. The Harrington foyer glowed with amber light, polished stone reflecting the flicker of recessed lamps and the muted shine of modern art along the walls. It smelled faintly of cedar and clean linen. The contrast was jarring luxury pressed up against a child still dripping rain onto the marble floor. Chloe stood just inside the threshold, arms folded tight across her chest, clutching a small, overstuffed backpack that sagged at the seams. Water pooled beneath her bare feet. She didn't step forward until Miles did, as if unsure she was truly allowed beyond the door. Two staff members hovered at a careful distance, exchanging looks they tried and failed to keep neutral. Miles crouched slowly, lowering himself to her eye level. He kept his hands visible, palms open, his voice deliberately even. "What's your name?" he asked. "And where did you come from?" She answered too fast.
Chloe. My name's Chloe.
Her eyes flicked toward the hallway and back again.
My aunt lives a few streets away. I just got lost in the rain. I'm sorry, sir. I shouldn't be here.
The words came out smooth, practiced, too smooth. Miles had negotiated billion-dollar deals. He knew the sound of something rehearsed. He studied her, how her shoulders stayed hunched, how her gaze never lingered anywhere long enough to settle. If her aunt lived nearby, why was she barefoot in a storm? Why the thin dress, worn, nearly translucent at the hem? Why the way her fingers dug into the strap of her backpack as if it were the only thing keeping her upright? One of the staff spoke gently from behind him. "Sir, we should probably call the police. They can help get her home." The reaction was instant. The hand of Chloe tightened so hard the fabric creaked. Her chin dipped, eyes darting to the front door, not with longing to leave, but with fear, sharp and unmistakable. Her voice shrank when she spoke, the confidence draining out of it. "Please don't," she said quickly. "Please. My aunt said, she said we'd get in trouble. I'll go. I can leave right now. I won't tell anyone." Miles felt something cold settle in his chest. Children who were safe didn't sound like that. They didn't bargain to disappear. "Hey," he said softly, keeping his tone low. "No one's in trouble. You're not in trouble. I just need to understand what's going on." She shook her head, a quick, frantic motion.
It's okay. I shouldn't have come. I'm sorry.
She shifted her weight as if preparing to bolt, eyes fixed on the door. Miles made a decision in that instant. "No one is calling anyone yet," he said, straightening slightly but not standing. "Let's get you dry first, then we'll talk." The housekeeper hesitated, then moved forward with a towel and a thick sweater. Chloe flinched at the movement, but didn't pull away when the towel was draped around her shoulders. Her small body shook beneath it. Miles waited until the staff stepped back again. "You said your aunt lives nearby," he said gently. "What's her name?" Chloe opened her mouth and closed it again. Her gaze slid to the floor. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper.
Marla.
The name landed like a pebble dropped into deep water. Miles didn't know why, but something about the way Chloe said it, careful, weighted, made him pause. "And your parents?" he asked. Her fingers tightened on the towel.
My mom died,
She said quickly, as if the sentence had been used often and needed no decoration.
a long time ago.
"I'm sorry," Miles said. He meant it, but the words felt thin. She nodded, eyes fixed on a darkened patch of marble. Then, without looking up, she added,
My dad didn't want me.
The sentence was delivered flat, stripped of emotion, like something she'd learned to say without feeling it. Miles felt a dull ache behind his eyes. "That's not always the whole story," he said. She looked up then, suddenly, as if startled by the idea. Her eyes searched his face, something desperate flickering there. And before she could stop herself, the truth slipped out raw and unfiltered. Her breath hitched.
You're my dad.
The room seemed to contract. One of the staff sucked in a breath. Somewhere deeper in the house, a clock ticked loudly, each second a hammer strike. Miles stared at her. The words didn't make sense. They couldn't. His daughter had died. He had signed the papers. He had mourned. He had built an entire life around that loss. "That's impossible," he said hoarsely. "I buried my child." Chloe's face crumpled, not into tears, but into something smaller, more contained. Disappointment, maybe, or resignation.
That's what Aunt Marla says too.
She murmured.
She says you didn't want me, that you told everyone I was gone.
Miles felt the floor tilt beneath him. He glanced up at the wall behind Chloe, where a framed photo hung him and Savannah on their wedding day, both laughing, her blonde hair caught mid-motion. Chloe's face, pale and drawn, mirrored Savannah's in a way that made his stomach twist. He stood slowly, aware of the staff watching, aware of the protocol he was breaking with every passing second. "Get her something warm to drink," he said quietly, "and dry clothes." As they moved, Chloe remained still, shoulders hunched, as if bracing for a verdict. Miles watched her, every instinct screaming that something here was wrong, not just emotionally, but factually. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "Chloe," he said, "if what you're saying is true, then someone lied to both of us." She looked up at him, hope and fear warring openly in her eyes. The silence that followed was heavy, charged with questions no one was ready to answer yet. And somewhere in that quiet, Miles felt the first crack in the certainty he had lived with for 7 years, a thin line of doubt that refused to close. Because if Chloe was lying, she was the most convincing liar he had ever seen. And if she wasn't? Miles swallowed hard. Then everything he believed about the worst day of his life was about to change. Steam still clung to the edges of the hallway mirror when Chloe came back downstairs. Someone had found a sweater that was far too big for her. Soft gray, the sleeves rolled twice at the wrists, and a pair of thick socks that slipped slightly on the polished floor. Her wet dress was folded neatly inside her backpack, as if she were afraid it might disappear if she let it out of sight for too long. She settled on the rug near the fireplace, close enough to feel the warmth, but not so close that she seemed greedy for it. Miles watched from a chair across the room as a staff member placed a mug of cocoa in her hands. Chloe wrapped her fingers around it immediately, sighing despite herself. The sound was small, involuntary, and it made something tighten in Miles's chest. For a moment, no one spoke. The house felt different with her in it, less echoing, less perfect. As Chloe lifted the mug to drink, the oversized sleeves slid back. Miles noticed it at the same time she did. Her hand jerked, instinctively trying to pull the fabric down again, but it was too late. A thin plastic band circled her wrist, yellowed and cracked with age. "Chloe," Miles said gently. "What's that?" Her shoulders tensed. She stared into the cocoa as if hoping the steam might hide her. For a second, Miles thought she might refuse. Then she slowly extended her arm, palm up, surrendering the wrist. The bracelet was old, worn nearly opaque, but the printed ink was still legible. Baby Harrington, Lakeview. Women's Center. Miles's breath caught so sharply it hurt. Lakeview. The name surged forward from memory without warning. Bright lights, rushed voices, Savannah gripping his hand as the monitors beeped. It was the hospital. There was no doubt about it. That's from the hospital," he said, barely trusting his voice. "Where did you get this?" Chloe shrugged, a small, helpless movement. "I always had it. Aunt Marla told me not to lose it." She hesitated, then added quietly, "She said it was nothing, just trash from when I was a baby." Miles stared at the bracelet, his mind racing. Hospitals didn't issue bracelets with his last name casually. They didn't make mistakes like that and then forget them. His gaze dropped to Chloe's chest, where something small glinted against the sweater. "A chain." "May I see that?" he asked softly, nodding toward her neck. Her fingers flew up instinctively, closing around the locket. Fear flashed across her face, not defiance, but worry. "I didn't steal it," she said quickly. "I promise." "I didn't think you did," Miles replied. "I just want to understand." She studied his face for a long moment, weighing something. Finally, she unclasped the chain and placed the locket in his palm. It was tarnished, the hinge stiff with age. "Nobody gave it to me," she said before he could ask. "I found it." "Found it where?" "In a drawer," she said. "In Aunt Marla's room." Her voice grew steadier as she explained, as if this part mattered to her. She asked me to help clean once. There was this bottom drawer that was stuck. I pulled too hard and it came loose. Chloe gestured with her hands, reenacting the motion. There was a bunch of old stuff behind it, cords, papers, and this was taped under the wood, like someone didn't want it seen. Miles felt a chill run through him. I waited until she left the room, Chloe continued. Then I took it. I wrapped it in a sock and put it in my backpack. She swallowed. I didn't know what it was at first. I just knew it felt important. Miles opened the locket. Inside was a tiny photograph, creased and torn at the edges. It was unmistakable. Him and Savannah, standing on the courthouse steps after their wedding, both laughing at something just out of frame. The picture had been part of a collage on their bedroom wall. He remembered it clearly. It had gone missing after Savannah's funeral. "Aunt Marla says you didn't want me," she said quietly. "She says you told everyone I was gone." Her voice wavered. I wanted to see if she was right. Miles closed his fingers around the locket, grounding himself. This wasn't a gift Marla had allowed Chloe to keep. This was something hidden, buried. And Chloe, 7 years old, careful and curious, had uncovered it on her own. "Thank you for telling me," he said, meaning far more than the words conveyed. She nodded, relief softening her shoulders. I didn't want to lie anymore. Later, when Chloe had fallen asleep curled up on the couch, her backpack clutched loosely to her chest, Miles stood alone in his study. The room was dim, lit only by the desk lamp. He placed the hospital bracelet and the locket side by side on the polished wood. They didn't belong to the same story he'd been living for 7 years. His gaze drifted to a thick file folder on the shelf, untouched since the day he'd packed it away. He pulled it down slowly. Estate of Savannah Harrington, Leonard Greer. Miles sat, opening the folder with a hand that trembled just slightly. Paperwork slid out, forms, signatures, dates. His signatures, Greer's notes in the margins. He took out his phone and scrolled to an old contact. Leonard Greer. His thumb hovered over the name. For the first time since Chloe had stepped through his gate, Miles felt something sharper than confusion take hold. Suspicion. And beneath it, a rising certainty that the truth about his daughter hadn't been lost. It had been hidden, and someone had worked very hard to keep it that way. He knew what protocol demanded. Call the police, hand everything over, step back, and let strangers decide what happened next. But as he stared at the plastic bracelet and the stolen locket, something in him refused to surrender his daughter's life a second time on blind trust. Tomorrow he would walk into a hospital and lay the facts in front of the people who had been there from the beginning, and then, with the truth finally in daylight, he would bring the system in. Miles did not go to the office the next morning. That alone would have made headlines inside Harrington Group. But he left his phone face down on the kitchen counter and focused instead on the quiet wait in the back seat of his car. Chloe slept curled against the door, her backpack wedged under her arm, as if it might vanish if she loosened her grip. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Every so often her brow twitched, as though even sleep had not fully convinced her she was safe. Riverview Children's Clinic sat on the edge of Northbridge, a low brick building softened by maple trees just beginning to lose their leaves. Miles had been there once before, years ago, when Savannah insisted on meeting a pediatric specialist before the baby was born, just to be sure. The memory tightened something in his chest as he parked. Dr. Evan Larkin recognized Miles immediately. He froze for half a second in the hallway, surprise flickering across his face before professional composure took over. "Miles," he said quietly, "it's been a long time." "It has," Miles replied. "I need to speak with you, privately." Evan glanced at Chloe, then nodded. He led them into his office and closed the door. The room smelled faintly of coffee and antiseptic, the walls lined with children's drawings and medical charts. Chloe sat in a chair too big for her, feet dangling, watching Miles with careful eyes. Miles placed the bracelet and the locket on Evan's desk. Evan didn't touch them at first. He read the bracelet, leaned back, then slowly leaned forward again, this time pulling a file from his cabinet. His fingers moved faster now, keys clicking as he typed an ID number into the system. The screen glowed between them. Riverview shared an electronic record system with Lakeview, and the old admission code slid cleanly through 7 years of dust, pulling up files no one had bothered to open since the day Miles's world came apart. "This number," Evan said slowly, "was issued here 7 years ago." He paused, choosing his words. "The baby survived the delivery." Miles felt the room tilt. Evan continued, steady and precise. "Savannah didn't. You were sedated when complications escalated. You were not in a state to make decisions." He met Miles's eyes. "You signed a broad power of attorney document that day." Leonard Greer's voice echoed in Miles's head. "I'll handle everything." Evan nodded, as if reading his thoughts. "Greer took over. Medical decisions, legal coordination, estate matters. It wasn't unusual under the circumstances." "And my daughter?" Miles asked. Evan exhaled. "She was transferred to neonatal care, stable within weeks." He hesitated. "After that, the record shows a guardianship request filed by Savannah's sister, Marla Jennings." Chloe's fingers tightened on the arms of her chair. "She claimed," Evan continued, "that you were emotionally unstable and unwilling to assume care. The paperwork was already approved." Approved by Greer, Miles realized. Signed away while he was half a world away, drowning himself in work so he wouldn't have to feel. "And the fire?" Miles asked. Evan's jaw tightened. 2 months later, a report came through. Apartment fire, infant deceased. He shook his head slowly. "There was no body transferred to our facility. No confirmation beyond the report itself." Miles stared at the desk. "I was told my child died." "You were told," Evan said gently. "You were not shown." Silence stretched between them. "So, I wasn't supposed to be gone?" she asked quietly. Evan's voice softened. "No, sweetheart, you weren't." Later that afternoon, Harper Lane joined them in the parking lot, jacket slung over one arm, expression already tight with concern. Miles handed him the folder Evan had printed. Harper scanned the pages once, then again, slower. "Greer didn't verify the fire," he said. "He accepted the report and closed the case." "Or he was paid not to," Miles replied. Harper nodded grimly. "There are unexplained consulting payments. Same firm that represented Marla." He looked up. "This wasn't an accident." Miles leaned against the car, watching Chloe through the rear window as she slept again, unaware of the tectonic shift occurring around her. "I want Greer investigated," he said, "and I want to know exactly what it will take to bring my daughter home." Harper didn't hesitate. "Then we start carefully, and we don't let anyone disappear again." Miles nodded. 7 years ago he had trusted the wrong silence. He would not make that mistake twice. Before they even left the parking lot, Harper was already on the phone with Northbridge Family Services requesting an emergency review and temporary placement hearing. This time, every door would open in the right order, every decision would be witnessed, and every step would leave a trail that no one could quietly erase. By late the next morning, the waiting area at Northbridge Family Services buzzed with a restless fluorescent hum that made even quiet movements feel loud. Metal chairs lined the walls, scuffed and cold, their legs screeching faintly whenever someone shifted. A toddler cried somewhere near the reception desk, the sound sharp and unrelenting. Posters about safe homes and healthy families peeled slightly at the corners, their optimism dulled by years of use. Miles sat upright, hands folded loosely in his lap, his posture controlled but alert. He had worn a simple navy jacket instead of a suit, a conscious choice to appear present rather than imposing. Chloe pressed close to his side, her shoulder tucked beneath his arm, fingers twisted into the fabric of his sleeve. Every time the door down the hall opened, she flinched. "They're not going to make me go back, are they?" she whispered. Miles leaned down so only she could hear him. "No one is making any decisions today without listening to you," he said. "I'm right here." The doors burst open. Marla Jennings entered in a rush of noise and movement, rainwater streaking her coat, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. Her blazer was wrinkled, her hair hastily pulled back, and her expression was already sharpened into accusation. She scanned the room, spotted Miles, and her voice rose instantly. "There he is," she said, pointing. "That's the man who took her." Every head turned. Chloe stiffened. For a split second, her body leaned toward Marla, a reflex born of years. This was the woman who had held her through fevers, who had sung to her on nights when the lights went out. Then Miles shifted slightly, his arm coming around her shoulders without thinking, creating a small barrier. Chloe's hand tightened in his sleeve, and she stayed where she was. "You never wanted her," Marla went on, pacing closer. "Now, suddenly you show up like some kind of hero because you've got money and lawyers?" "Ms. Jennings," a calm voice cut in. Jenna Cole stepped forward, clipboard tucked under her arm. "We're going to take this into a conference room." Inside, the walls were bare, the table scarred by old scratches. Marla dropped into a chair, arms crossed, foot tapping hard against the floor. Miles remained standing until Jenna gestured for him to sit. Chloe took the chair closest to the wall, knees drawn up, eyes fixed on the tabletop. Jenna spoke evenly. "This is an emergency placement review. We're here to determine immediate safety." Marla laughed, sharp and bitter. "Safety? I kept her fed. I kept a roof over her head. Where was he?" Miles felt the accusation land, heavy and familiar. He could have lashed back. Instead, he waited. "Chloe," Jenna said gently, "can you tell me why you went to Mr. Harrington's home?" Chloe's fingers curled into her sweater. Her voice trembled, but it didn't break. "He didn't take me," she said. "I went to him." Marla slammed her hand on the table. "Don't lie." Chloe flinched, then looked up past Marla to Miles. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "Aunt Marla told me my dad didn't want me," Chloe continued. "She said he told everyone I was gone. But I found a picture, and the bracelet." She swallowed. The room fell quiet. Miles finally spoke. His voice was low, controlled. "I have documentation," he said, sliding a folder across the table. "Hospital records, guardianship filings, the fire report, bank statements showing consulting payments to Leonard Greer. I was misled. My daughter did not die." Marla's expression cracked. Tears sprang to her eyes, then vanished just as quickly, replaced by fury. "You were never there," she snapped. "You had your planes and your projects. Somebody had to pay the rent. Somebody had to change diapers." Jenna held up a hand. "Ms. Jennings, this isn't about assigning moral credit. It's about safety." Chloe's shoulders shook. "I don't want her to go to jail," she whispered suddenly. She did bad things, but she's still my aunt." Jenna looked at Miles. "We're not here to destroy her," Miles said quietly. "We're here to protect Chloe." The decision came swiftly. A protective hold. Temporary placement. Chloe would not return with Marla tonight. Miles was approved as an interim placement pending a full hearing. In the hallway afterward, Chloe collapsed into Miles's chest, sobbing relief and guilt tangled together. "I'll stay," Miles murmured. "Every step." Behind them, Marla sat alone, hands shaking, staring at the floor. Justice, it turned out, was rarely clean. But for the first time, it had begun. Night had already settled over Harbor Glen by the time Miles brought Chloe back to the estate. The rain had thinned into a whisper against the windows, soft and steady, as if the storm outside had exhausted itself just as the storm inside Chloe's life had peaked. Jenna had followed them home earlier, walking briskly through each hallway, checking safety locks, emergency lights, room arrangements. Her quiet approval was the final confirmation that Chloe could stay here under temporary supervision. But it was the moment Jenna left, closing the door gently behind her, that the house grew still. No more officials, no accusations. Just a little girl standing in an oversized sweater, staring at a staircase as though climbing it might change her life forever. Miles didn't rush her. He let the silence stretch until Chloe finally whispered, almost too softly to hear, "Where should I sleep?" "Anywhere you want," he said. Then, realizing the choice might overwhelm her, he added, "I set up a room you might like. It's smaller than the guest rooms upstairs, a little cozier." Her shoulders eased just slightly. He led her down the hallway to a room beside his study, a quiet corner of the house most visitors never saw. The walls were a warm yellow, soft rather than bright. A low bed sat beneath a window seat scattered with pillows. He had turned on a small lamp instead of the overhead lights, so the room glowed rather than shone. Chloe stepped inside as if entering a museum. She touched nothing at first, just stared. "It's warm," she murmured. "It's yours," Miles said, "for as long as you want it." She turned to him sharply, as if testing whether he meant it. Whatever she saw in his face made her look down again, suddenly shy. A folded set of pajamas lay on the bed. Someone on staff had picked them out soft cotton, light blue, patterned with tiny white stars. Chloe brushed her fingers over them and whispered, "These are new." "Yes," Miles said. "No one ever buys new things," she added softly. "Not for me." Her voice carried no complaint, just fact. Miles felt something ache inside him. "Do you want to change into them?" he asked. She nodded. He stepped into the hall, leaving the door cracked open because she had asked earlier, in that small conference room, if he'd leave the door open a little. Not wide, not shut, just enough to breathe. When she emerged, she looked younger somehow, softer. The sleeves fit this time. Her hair, still damp, clung in small waves to her cheeks. Miles hesitated, unsure how to begin, then gently lifted a hairbrush from the dresser. "May I?" he asked. No one had asked permission all day, not the staff at the center, not Marla, not even Jenna. Chloe blinked at him, surprised, then nodded. He sat on the edge of the window seat, and she climbed onto the bed, turning her back toward him. The brush snagged almost immediately on a knot. Miles winced as if the pain were his. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "It's okay," she said. "It always gets like that when it rains." He took his time, loosening each snag carefully. The quiet between them grew comfortable, the lamp's glow warming the room. When he finished, he handed her the brush. She held it as though it were something precious. In the kitchen, he attempted a snack cutting apples unevenly, dipping them into peanut butter. One slice slipped from his hand, landing on the counter with a plop. The sound startled both of them. "That wasn't supposed to happen," Miles said, deadpan. "Maybe it wanted to escape," she replied, wiping a tear of laughter from her cheek. He looked at her, the exhaustion, the lingering fear, and yet this small spark of humor, and something inside him shifted, a tiny hinge moving back into place. They returned to the bedroom. Miles placed a small framed photo on the nightstand. Savannah, smiling in sunlight, her hair caught in a breeze he could almost feel. Chloe reached toward it slowly, reverently. "That's your mom," he said quietly. "She laughed louder than anyone in this house ever did." "She's pretty," Chloe whispered. "She was," Miles said, "and stubborn. She used to dance in the kitchen and spill flour everywhere, then blame the dog." Chloe's eyes brightened. "I like that story." He smiled faintly. "There are many more." A long silence fell. Chloe climbed into bed, pulling the blanket to her chin. Her small hand clutched the corner of the pillow, gripping it the same way she had held her backpack, like a lifeline. The door remained cracked. She watched it anxiously until Miles sat beside the bed. "Chloe," he said gently, "can I ask you something?" She nodded cautiously. "Why did you leave that night? Why in the rain?" Chloe stared at the ceiling. Her voice came out small and uneven. "Aunt Marla said we'd have to leave again, that people were coming to take her away. She told me if I ever told anyone she hit me or about the men who came by sometimes, they'd throw me in a foster home, and she'd go to jail." She swallowed hard. "I didn't want her to go away. She did bad things, but she held me when I had nightmares. She bought me this dress once, even though it was from a thrift store." Her voice cracked. "She tried when she wasn't scared." Miles listened, not interrupting. He knew what it meant for a child to separate love from safety. It was the kind of decision no 7-year-old should have to make. The room felt impossibly still. "Chloe," Miles said softly, leaning forward, "I never chose to let you go. I never chose to believe you were gone. I signed papers because someone I trusted told me there was nothing left to hope for. That was my mistake, not looking harder, not asking more questions." She turned to face him, eyes shining. "What if they think I'm lying? What if the judge says I have to go back? What if you change your mind and leave?" Miles reached out and gently took her hand, small and fragile beneath his palm. "I disappeared once because I believed a lie. I won't disappear again, not from you, not ever." She exhaled shakily, as if releasing a weight she wasn't meant to carry. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." He stood, tucking the blanket around her as she settled deeper into the pillows. Her eyes drifted shut, though her hand remained wrapped around his for a long moment, unwilling to let go until sleep finally claimed her. Miles stayed in the doorway long after her breathing steadied. The lamp cast a soft halo over her face, illuminating the faint bruise along her jawline, the traces of fear that sleep had not yet erased. He felt the weight of the lost years settle over him again, but this time it didn't crush, it anchored. The truth had been buried, but the child, the daughter, had survived. And now that she was here, asleep in the smallest, warmest room of his silent house, Miles understood something with absolute clarity. He had been given a second chance, not to fix the past, but to show up in the present, to become the father she needed now. He closed the door to a narrow slit, just as she'd asked, and walked quietly down the hallway, the echo of her whispered fears still in his ears. Tomorrow would bring hearings, officials, and consequences. But tonight, The house didn't feel like a museum anymore. It felt like a place someone actually lived in. Tonight, there was someone to protect. Morning arrived gently, as though aware the house had carried too much heaviness the night before. Sunlight crept across the hardwood floors in soft golden bands. For years, mornings in the Harrington estate were uniform. Coffee brewed automatically at 6, newspapers arranged neatly by the kitchen island, silence filling all the spaces conversation used to occupy. But today felt different before Miles even reached the stairs. He could hear movement in the kitchen, small, careful sounds, a spoon clinking, a chair scraping. When he stepped inside, he found Chloe sitting at the island, hair brushed into uneven waves, the sleeves of her star-patterned pajamas still a little too long. She had arranged a napkin, a fork, and an empty plate in front of her, as if preparing for something ceremonial. Her eyes lifted immediately when he entered. "Good morning," she said, voice hushed but hopeful. "Morning," Miles replied, clearing his throat. "Did you sleep okay?" She nodded. The room didn't creak. Some places creak at night. She hesitated. "I kept the light on, though." "That's fine," he said. "Lights are allowed." He moved to the stove. Pancakes, he thought. He had absolutely no idea how to make pancakes, but the desire to try surprised him with its force. He found a box mix in the pantry, something Savannah used to buy just in case, and set to work, pouring batter into the pan with an earnestness that would have embarrassed him in any other setting. Chloe watched intently. "They look like clouds," she said as one bubbled awkwardly in the pan. "That's generous," Miles replied. "This one looks more like a map." "A map to where?" she asked. He flipped it over. It folded in on itself. "Nowhere useful." Chloe giggled, a soft, unguarded sound. She reached over to poke one pancake with her fork. "I can make a face on mine," she announced, placing berries in 2 uneven circles for eyes and dragging a syrup line across the plate. "It's smiling." "It's brave, if it's smiling at this hour," Miles said. He didn't realize until then how long it had been since he'd spoken to someone without rushing, without guarding every word. Chloe ate slowly, but with a focus that told him meals had never been certain before. She scraped her plate clean, then licked a bit of syrup from her thumb when she thought he wasn't looking. A soft knock sounded at the door. Jenna Cole stepped inside, clipboard in hand, wearing the same steady professionalism she'd carried the day before. Chloe's posture straightened immediately, her fork pausing mid-air. "Good morning," Jenna said gently. "I hope I'm not too early." "No," Miles said. "We're ready." Jenna sat across from Chloe. "How are you feeling today?" Chloe shrugged, eyes lowering. "Okay." "That's enough," Jenna said. "Okay is a good place to start." They talked through the next steps, the emergency hearing scheduled for this afternoon, the questions Chloe might be asked, the presence of court representatives. Then Jenna asked, "Chloe, would you feel safe talking today?" "You don't have to say everything, just what you can." Chloe looked at Miles. It was instinctive, small, subtle, but full of meaning. She searched his face as if trying to find not just reassurance, but proof he would stay. Miles leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "You don't have to do this alone," he said softly. "When it gets scary, and it will, I'll be right behind you, because I should have been there before, and I wasn't." He swallowed. "I can't change that, but I can show up now." Chloe blinked, stunned into stillness. "Aunt Marla said you disappeared because you were sad," she murmured. "She said you weren't ready." Miles closed his eyes for a moment. "She wasn't wrong," he said. But sadness isn't an excuse. It's just what kept me from seeing what I needed to see. She studied him, really studied him, like a child who had spent her whole life evaluating the trustworthiness of adults for survival. "Will you still stay?" she asked, "even if the judge says I can't stay here forever?" His voice didn't waver. "I'll stay through the whole process, every meeting, every hearing, every decision. You won't be walking into any of it by yourself again." Something settled in Chloe then. Her shoulders loosened. She lifted her chin a fraction. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll tell the truth." Jenna nodded approvingly. "That takes a lot of courage." Miles cleared his throat. "Before we go, I want to go over what happens next," he said, shifting into a calm determination that surprised even him. "I've spoken with Harper. He's preparing a request for temporary custody, not just visitation placement." He looked at Chloe. "That means you'd live here, with me, while everything gets sorted out." Chloe's eyes widened. Hope flickered, then dimmed just as quickly. "But, Aunt Marla, if I say things, she'll go to jail forever." "Not necessarily," Jenna said. "The court may recommend treatment instead of punishment." Miles nodded. "We aren't trying to destroy her life. We just want to make sure you're safe." He paused. "If she accepts treatment, if she gets help, if she proves she can change, there could be supervised visits. Eventually." Chloe pulled at the hem of her pajama sleeve. "She used to sing to me when I had fevers," she whispered. "I don't want her to hurt forever. I just don't want to live like that anymore." Miles felt something in him break, quietly but unmistakably. "You don't have to choose between loving her and being safe," he said. "Both can be true." The clock on the stove ticked softly. When it was finally time to leave, Chloe put on the sweater and socks again, then slipped her hand into Miles's without being asked. Her grip was small but certain. The drive to the courthouse took 15 minutes, but it felt longer. Every street a reminder of how much had been stolen from both of them. When they arrived, Jenna met them on the steps, guiding them through the marble lobby where the echo of footsteps made Chloe stiffen. "You okay?" Miles murmured. She nodded once, though her fingers tightened around his. Through the double doors, the courtroom waited. Wood panels, high ceilings, chairs arranged in rigid order, intimidating even to adults. Chloe's steps faltered. Miles leaned down. "Remember what I said," he whispered. "Look for me if you get scared. I'll be right behind you." She lifted her chin. "Okay." Together they walked inside, Miles carrying a worn manila folder filled with evidence and hard-won truth, Chloe carrying only her courage. For the first time in 7 years, the future did not feel like a closed door. It felt like a beginning. The courtroom felt colder than the late winter air outside. Not harsh, not hostile, just cold in the way official buildings often were, built more for decisions than for comfort. Light filtered through high windows, pale and muted, casting long rectangular shadows across the polished floor. Each step echoed. Chloe sat in a child-sized chair near the front, her feet barely touching the ground. Someone had given her a small carton of apple juice, unopened, sitting untouched on her lap. She held her knees together, hands pressed tightly between them, fighting the urge to disappear into the furniture. Miles sat directly behind her, close enough for her to feel his presence without him overshadowing her. Harper stood at the table, papers neatly arranged, his calm demeanor a counterbalance to the tension rippling through the room. Marla sat across the aisle. Her blazer was cleaner today, hair pulled back neatly, but her hands shook as she gripped a tissue. Her eyes flicked from Chloe to the judge, then down at the polished surface of the table. She looked angry, afraid, and exhausted all at once. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair, adjusted her glasses. "We're here to determine temporary custodial placement for minor Chloe Jennings," she began, "and to review allegations of neglect, false guardianship representation, and fraud." Chloe shivered. Miles leaned forward slightly. "I'm right here," he whispered. Her shoulders relaxed an inch. Jenna stepped up first, presenting the timeline. Hospital transfer, guardianship filings, the fire report that was never verified. She described Chloe's condition on arrival. The thin dress, the fear of police, the inconsistent story that masked something much deeper. Then came Harper. He moved with precision, placing documents before the judge one by one. The power of Attorney Greer had used to make decisions Miles never reviewed, the falsified guardianship forms, the unexplained payments from Marla's attorney's firm to Greer's trust account. The judge flipped through the pages slowly, deliberately. "Mr. Harrington," she said, "you truly had no knowledge your child survived." Miles stood. "Your Honor, I was told she died. I was shown documents, not evidence. I should have asked questions. I accept responsibility for that. But I did not abandon her." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Truth carried its own volume. When it was Chloe's turn, Jenna knelt beside her. "You can say as much or as little as you feel comfortable with, okay?" Chloe nodded, her throat bobbing. "Okay." Her voice was barely audible at first. She described the nights Marla couldn't pay rent, the men who came and went, the times she had to pack quickly because they had to leave again. She talked about the fear she learned to recognize before she learned to read. Then she talked about the drawer, the stuck one, how she pulled too hard and it came loose, how she found the locket taped beneath the rail. The courtroom leaned in. "I thought, if he didn't want me," Chloe murmured, eyes lowered, "she wouldn't hide something like that. And if he did want me, maybe she lied." She lifted her chin a little. "So I went to find him." Harper gave her a soft nod. Jenna's eyes shimmered with quiet pride. When Chloe finished, Marla finally broke. She pushed her chair back and stood abruptly, hands trembling. "I wasn't trying to hurt her," she cried. "I didn't know how to take care of a baby. I didn't know how to take care of myself. When the bills came, when people came after me, I panicked. I thought if he found out she was alive, he'd take her, and I'd have nothing left." Her voice cracked. "I loved her. I just didn't know how to love her right." Chloe flinched at the sound, torn between old loyalty and new understanding. Miles watched her closely, ready to step forward if she asked, ready to hold back if she needed space. He refused to be another adult who took choices away from her. The judge listened to every word. When she finally spoke, her tone was firm, not cruel, not gentle, but balanced, like a scale finding equilibrium. "Ms. Jennings, this court recognizes your stated emotional attachment to the child. However, your actions demonstrate instability, deception, and potential endangerment. You will enter into a structured rehabilitation and counseling program. Failure to comply will result in a full protective order barring contact." Marla sank into her chair, sobbing quietly. The judge turned to Miles. "Mr. Harrington, the evidence supports your claim that you were misled. More importantly, the child demonstrates clear attachment to you, and your actions, since her arrival, show a willingness to assume appropriate parental responsibility. Therefore, temporary custody is granted to you, effective immediately." Chloe gasped, soft, breathy, like a sound she'd been holding inside. "You will ensure," the judge continued, "that the child receives therapy, stability, and ongoing support. A permanent custody determination will be made in the coming months." Miles nodded once. "Yes, Your Honor." The gavel fell, not dramatically, just enough to signal that something in their world had shifted permanently. One afternoon, months later, they stood together in the memorial garden behind Riverview Children's Clinic. The stone bearing Savannah's name was simple, carved with clean lines. Chloe knelt and placed a white daisy at its base. "Do you think she's mad at you?" she asked suddenly, her voice fragile. "For not looking for me sooner?" Miles knelt beside her. "No," he said, his voice rough but steady. "I think she's just grateful that I finally showed up." Chloe looked down at her locket. When she opened it, the old torn wedding photo was gone, replaced with a new picture of her and Miles in front of the house. Behind them, on a table, was a framed photo of Savannah smiling. The hospital bracelet, once hidden in the bottom of her backpack, now rested safely in a shadow box on Miles's nightstand. Not a secret, not a relic of guilt, a reminder of what was found, a reminder of what was nearly lost. As they walked back toward the parking lot, a light rain began. Nothing like the storm that had brought her to his gate. Soft, gentle, almost warm. Chloe looked up at him, a playful glimmer in her eyes. "Dad?" Miles inhaled. The word still hit him like a gift. "Yeah?" She smiled, a small, knowing smile that held both past and present inside it. "Do you remember me now?" He squeezed her hand, the answer rising from a place so deep it hurt. "I remember everything that matters." And for the first time in 7 years, the world felt whole again, not because it had been repaired perfectly, but because they had chosen to build something new from what remained. A family, a second chance, a beginning. And that's where this story finds its resting place. I'll admit something to you. After telling this one, I had to sit with it for a while. Sometimes life doesn't give us clean endings, only second chances we choose, one brave moment at a time. This story reminded us that showing up late still matters, and love can begin the instant we stop looking away. Though fictional, it was created to pass along a little hope, courage, and quiet strength for everyday life, yours and mine. What about you? Did any part of this story land somewhere deep? Did it remind you of a moment you almost missed, or one you chose to face anyway? I'd really love to share your thoughts in the comments. If this story stayed with you, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps these stories reach the people who might need them most. And if you're not ready to leave just yet, there are more inspiring stories waiting for you on the end screen and in the playlist. Thank you for spending this moment with me. I'm Flint, wishing you warmth, clarity, and the courage to look back and forward with an open heart. I'll be here for the next story. See you soon.